You didn't get that up.
Where is my phone? I won't talk about music yet. In a moment, I'll talk about my music.
We are live.
Let me.
Yeah, let's do the panic button because it's not taking us up there
Not
properly.
Sure why. This in.
Okay. 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And we are in. It appears we've had to reset, so it appears that we're okay, and would just love to welcome everybody who's here. Everybody who's here in the Duzie Live. Duzie Live.
Since we had to reboot, we just have to change a couple things up here, and then we're ready to go. I think we're ready now. I got to tell you a little bit something while you're coming in. Every day when we do a Duzie Live, we choose a song that somehow encapsulates where we feel the day is going to go. And I mean, it's been everything from kids songs to worship songs. And
Yeah.
Today, as I sat at the breakfast table, I began to think, what's the song for today? What's the song for STERB? I started thinking, are there any songs that I know that start with STERB? No, there is no song. And then in my mind popped Daybreak. And it's a song I listened to years ago by Barry Manilow, and then it was sung by Danny Gaither, one of the Gaithers.
It goes like this. And it's daybreak.
Let me read it.
Da, na, 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 na. Some of you might have heard it. Takes you back.
Listen to these lyrics as we jump into this. It says, I'm singing to the world. It's time we let the Spirit come in. Let it come on in. I'm singing to the world. Everyone's caught in a spin. Look at where we've been. Okay, so we're right there, I think, where we've been before this outbreak, before this need of a daybreak. Where have we been? We've been running around year after year.
Yes.
Blinded with pride, blinded with fear. But it's not outbreak, it's daybreak.
Well, it's
if you want to believe, okay, if you want to believe, it can be daybreak. Ain't no time to grieve. So it isn't. We shouldn't get stuck in the grief. We have to move on beyond the grief. Say it's daybreak if you'll only believe and let it shine, shine, shine all around the world. Then he goes on and says, sing it to the world. Proclaim this to the world. Mm-hmm. What's the point of putting it down? There's so much love to share. I'm singing to the world. Don't you see it all comes around? It's come around to this point. We come around to the STERBs, to move past them. The feeling is everywhere. We've been closing our eyes day after day, covered with clouds, losing our way, but it's daybreak. If you only believe, it can be daybreak. Ain't no time to grieve. Say it's daybreak. If you only believe, and let it shine, shine, shine all around the world. So that's where we were this morning. That's the song that's running through my head. Yes. And as we move into these moments together, it's a daybreak. It's a daybreak of love that we deal with our grief. We make it good grief. We move past the places that are going to get us stuck, those behaviors that are not healthy, into the behaviors that are right. And we connect back again to our world.
Yes, so
I'm excited about that.
And the song is singing. I love the song. It's good. We've been hearing it a bunch of times. It's on replay, which is good because it has a really dynamic message. Well, we're welcome again to Good Grief. This is our Duzie Live time. And last week we talked about our good grief, and we had a special guest, Kim Kukura, who's back with us. So Kim, pop yourself back in here and let's make sure our video's working. She's got her screen. There she is. Hi, Kim.
Hi.
Last week we spoke about good grief, and we unpacked what is grief. Basically, when two conflicting emotions are happening at the same time. That was my takeaway. Wow. When you're happy, sad, this, that, and they don't seem to go together like joy and happiness goes together, but they're conflicting, then we're in a time of grief. And we looked at that last week, and this week we're talking about good grief STERBs. Can you tell us, what does STERBs stand for?
STERBs is an acronym for short-term energy relieving behaviors.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to identify some of those and we're going to work through that. Here's what you can expect today. You can expect to talk about good grief. And Kim's going to roll us through some more tools, paintbrushes for the painting of the wall and not just a screwdriver, the right tools for good grief. So thank you for showing up. First of all, thank you for showing up for yourself.
Yeah.
Each one of us individually are going to learn about good grief. And so you're showing up for yourself to learn for yourself. And secondly, you are showing up, many of you, for someone else. You're a helper, you are journeying with someone. And so you're showing up both for yourself to learn, but also to help others learn.
Let's see who's in the room. Who's joined us here today? We have got, I'll go back a little bit. There we go. Michaela, welcome from Portugal.
Hi, Michaela.
Kim is definitely from Virginia.
Yay. We're coming from Atlanta area. And Yoas is coming in from the Netherlands. Thank you for joining us, Yoas, again. And Rahel from Germany. Thank you. Roseanne back from the Netherlands. Some of you are becoming our regulars. Love to have you. Matt Taylor, thank you for joining us. Great England. To have you. Kat Sloan coming from Michigan. Thank you for joining us, Kat's my sister. Jacob Faulkner, a previous guest, and the artist. And he's coming in from California. Lara from Switzerland. Thanks for coming in. Cheryl Potter's coming from Marlette, Michigan. Dan's mom and dad there.
Hey,
Diane from Wisconsin. Thank you for jumping in and joining us. Tammy from West Africa, my sister. Thank you. Jess B. Coming in from Jamaica. Madam Brown, love having you in the house. Bring your beautiful self. And Bishu coming from Istanbul.
That's great.
Thank you so much.
In a moment, we want Kim just to start unpacking a little bit of a review from last week. But those of you who were here last week, if at the same time you just write a little bit of your takeaway from last week, just in the chat, just what's maybe the one thing that you have been pondering on or thinking about that we can get a collection of. This is where we were as we move forward.
That's great. So we are talking about good grief for yourself and for others. We're going to talk STERBs. That's the main topic that Kim's going to roll out for us today. Examples of what short-term energy relieving behaviors are, and also what to be aware of so we can know what to do and some tools to go in there. We're going to learn how to express emotions. That's just the beginning. And then we're going to, about the 60-minute mark, we're going to jump into what we're calling backstage. Some of you only have an hour, and that's okay. You stay as long or short as you can. But for those who want to stay for the longer piece of it, we're going to jump into that backstage portion. And our highlight today for backstage is 10 ways to cope with isolation. Kim's going to walk us through that as well. And we're going to have extra time to answer questions. And at any time, we want to invite you to write in the chat what you're feeling, what you're thinking. There's a community time in the chat, and you're going to be there.
I'm going to step out of this room and go over to the chat. I'll be over there. Anytime you see Susie Potter answering, it's actually me.
Because it's my computer.
That's right. So I'm going to go there now. See you in the room.
Yeah. So Matt loves that. Madame Brown is in the house, and that's awesome. So cheer each other on. That's fantastic. So we've got an amazing setup of what's going to come here today for Good Grief STERBs. And we're so happy to have Kim here, who's just going to walk us through that. So meanwhile, go ahead, as Dan invited you to do that, even as we get started and get on the same page with grief. And trying to think about grief, anything you learned from the past, Duzie Live last week about good grief that stands out for you. Thank you. Some of you are writing that in there. We want to take that. And meanwhile, Kim, for those who maybe weren't here for last week, Duzie Good Grief, give us a nutshell of grief.
Okay. So it's exactly what you said, the mixed emotions that we have, particularly in response to a loss or a change in a familiar pattern. Yeah. So, and these losses can be tangible, things we can see, touch, feel. And these losses can also be intangible, things that that we experience, such as a loss of feeling safe or a loss of normalcy in this pandemic. That would be considered an intangible loss. So any kind of loss, any kind of change, anytime you feel like you need to reach for someone or something, it's not there for you anymore, and you have mixed feelings, you're experiencing grief. And it's normal and it's natural. Yeah.
Normal and natural. I love when you say that, because we're like, it's only me. When in reality, there's a lot of us experiencing it in our own unique ways.
That's right. And that's a good point too, that every griever is unique and different. That we all have, even if we've lost the same person in our family, each of us had a unique and different relationship to that person. So each of us is going to express our grief differently, because we're unique and different, and we're going to grieve different things about our particular relationship than what others would grieve about their particular relationship with that person.
Thank you. Michaela is saying, my takeaway is that it's not natural or easy, but it's better to let emotions out rather than hold them in. Yeah. Do you want to make any comments on that, Kim? That's a beautiful description.
It sure is. And it is. It's just a beautiful description. And I love that that's a takeaway from this. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Cheryl said last week seemed to help put this home confinement. I'm not quite sure, but it probably helped her in the home confinement situation. Yeah, and for me, just what I said, conflicting emotions equals grief. So time to use these tools that we're learning right here. And Dan says, embrace your losses. It's normal and natural. And Matt says, I think the breakthrough aha moment for me last week was the joint picture of picking up stones in our backpack over time, but also that we're taught how to accumulate people, places, things, but not taught how to let go. That was one of my favorite bits too, Matt, where Kim was talking about, she put out her hands like this and we just keep adding to our hands. But we don't know how to take things out. And I think these tools are helping us learn how to do that. Okay, Cheryl is saying, sorry, hit the wrong button. You're doing great, technology. You're doing great. It seemed to put this home confinement into perspective, helping to deal with the feelings of having to separate ourselves from those we want to see and hug and just go anywhere we want to.
Yeah.
And Dan says, pick up and let go. Anybody else, any highlights? Go ahead and put those right over there in the chat. This experience here at Duzie Live is richer, and it is what it is because of what you put in the chat and of the way that you respond. So thank you for being willing to do that. Laura says, I noticed that if someone is talking about grief, they always think about when someone died. It is hard for others to understand that there's another part of grief.
Yes, Laura. Yeah.
And Bishu says the emotional chart was really helpful. How to find what type of feelings and emotion behind it. Thank you, Bishu, for saying that. And that's coming up soon. When we get to that point, we're going to roll out that circle chart of emotions and allow you to respond to it yet again this week. And I also just want to say that there will be times when we hear this sound. Does anybody know what this sound represents? This sound represents
the pole.
The pole.
The pole. So we're going to have times where Kim teaches us and we want you to respond to it. And how you respond in the pole is completely, we don't know who's doing what or saying what. So you can be completely honest in that space. And that helps us know better what to talk about right now or what to unpack a little bit better. And Laura just wants to add. So for me, pretty everything of what Kim said last time was some good news.
Oh, Laura.
Yes. Yeah. Matt says, that's a good point, Laura. How can we even downplay our own grief? Because it's not as big as someone else's reason for grief. And Kim, talk to us a little bit about grief comparison.
Yeah, so one of the sayings is to compare is to despair. So we experience each of our own losses at 100%. So to compare it to someone else's it's apples and oranges. It's not the same thing. So we are responsible for our own grief over our losses, no matter what the size, large or small, because remember, even if they're quote unquote tiny, if enough of them accumulate, it becomes heavy. So it's just very important for us to express out our grief and move toward completion, like we'll talk about today, so that it's not accumulating. So compare equals despair. There is no need to compare our losses to others. We want to grieve ours and allow others the freedom and dignity to grieve theirs.
Wow. So Kim, in the chat, many people are repeating that. Compare, despair. To compare is to despair.
Mm-hmm.
I've never heard it like that before, and that just gives us something to grab hold of, so that we don't just live in our grief and get stuck in that space, but we actually can go for it.
Yeah.
Wow, love all the comments. Kim, I think it's time. What do you think? Shall we just jump into where we're at here today, training-wise?
Yeah, sure.
That would love that.
Okay, so we are going to talk some more about STERBs today, because that is a huge part of having good grief. And we're going to talk about the who, what, when, where, and why. So as we move into the who, there is a video link here. Maybe we can, I don't know if someone can click, type that link into the chat if someone would want to look this up later. It's a short video of the authors of the Grief Recovery Handbook talking about why they wrote the handbook, that when they were grieving, they couldn't find anyone to talk to that could help them. And so they began to learn some action steps, some things they could actually do, some tools to help them move toward recovery, and they wanted to share that with the world. So they've written the Grief Recovery Handbook. It has been translated into, I think, most languages on all continents, all inhabitable continents at this time. And anyway, but we weren't able to play the link. So if you would want to take a screenshot of that and maybe watch it at some other time. But basically, it was a recap of good grief, and we've kind of already covered that. So we can move to the next slide.
All right.
All right. So this is just kind of an overview of what we're talking about. Who might experience STERBs, and it's grievers, because we learned last week grievers have emotional energy, and the word emotion is in the word emotional. So we have a feeling, and a feeling is kind of how it feels in our body, like the gut feeling, the ache, just how it feels. And then the emotion is how it's expressed energy-wise, happy or sad. So we've got this emotional energy, and what do we do with it often? We find these short-term energy-relieving behaviors, but these things, if they become patterns, can lead to other losses. And we'll talk more about that. And then the when we can start to become aware, and the where are we headed with all of this toward completion, and the why, starting to think about meaning in our grief. Okay.
Yeah, I just want to jump in here, Kim, if that's okay. Yeah, I thought that was very powerful, what you just said. I didn't hear it the first time. In your body, you feel stuff. But in the emotion, there's some kind of energy. And that's what we're talking about here, is the emotions. And Jess has a quick comment that's really very powerful. Not even just in grief, but in general, you are not anyone else. Focus on who you are, and not becoming or recreating someone else in yourself or in others. Allow them and yourself to be unique.
Oh, that's beautiful. That is a beautiful statement.
Yes, so good. So carry on with us, Kim.
Okay. So this next link we talked about the 6 intellectual things that we try to say to people or to ourselves to help us feel like we're recovered when we're grieving. And number 6 of those myths was stay busy. Stay busy was kind of that way of giving time to heal our wounds. Just give it time. So we fill that time with staying busy. And the title of this link is, what do sex, drugs, and rock and roll have to do with grief? And it's because when we have this energy and we're staying busy, we may start turning to some activities or behaviors to deal with that energy that could become unhelpful. Okay.
I'm trying to type that in for everybody.
Oh, thank you.
1 second.
Sure. And again, this was John James, one of the authors and founders of the Grief Recovery Institute. And he actually was one of my trainers. I had the privilege of being in a room with him as one of my trainers, which was a fabulous experience.
Oh, there's lots of little details here. I'm almost there.
Okay.
9, 8. I think that might be right.
Okay.
So you guys can get there.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right. So the what of STERBs, they're emotions. So as we've already said, all losses produce emotional energy. This is normal. But often because our parents learned what their parents learned, instead of helping us to express that energy in a healthy way or to find the words to say it out, we're given something to help us feel better. Really, it just makes us feel different. And I have a picture of a cookie there because that's very near and dear to my STERB heart. I was given cookies or something sweet as a child to help me feel better. So it doesn't help us discover the source of our pain or our emotional energy. It just gives temporary relief. So then we have this illusion that we feel better. And then we then have to keep returning to that activity or to that substance or that food to keep going back for that short-term relief it's giving us. And it can develop into habitual behavior or addictive patterns. And we never really get relief from the emotional pain. So the feelings stay kind of buried in our heart. We don't complete that unfinished business. We just keep covering it over. And the previous slide with that link to stay busy, he likened it to being on a hamster wheel. And just like I've got all this emotional energy, I'm going to keep doing all of these things, but they don't get me to completion. I'm just on the hamster wheel and the pain is still in my heart.
So where we're going right now is trying to realize, okay, we've got these emotions. What do we do with them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So here are some examples of some STERBs, short-term energy relieving behaviors. Because it's short-term, it only lasts a short time that we feel like that energy is relieved, and we have to keep going back and going back. So these and other activities can have a negative impact on a griever if they're done to avoid or cover over feelings, those mixed feelings that come from loss. So many of these activities are fine activities, but if they are used, again, to avoid or cover over is when they become hurtful to us. So, and you can see to the right, and we've got the list of activities there. Food, alcohol, drugs, anger, control, or humor. Like we can just land on one expression of emotion and decide that's the only way we're going to express out this energy. Fantasy in many different forms. We can just isolate because it's easier not to have these awkward conversations with people who don't understand emotions. Religious activity, I talked about that last week. I just buried myself in church work during a time of my own personal pain. And yet I never got to complete that unfinished business until I learned what we're talking about today. Sleep, sex, shopping, working, anything can be used. And there are more. These are simply examples. So we see the iceberg over here, and what it looks like to the world above the surface of the water, it looks like people have addiction, and that they're maybe a drunk, or we call them a sinner, or a junkie, or a liar. We see all of these behaviors of how we define people. But if we could see under the surface, if we could see under the water, and we could see the grief of a broken home, the fear, the mixed emotions of something's happened where we've had a loss of safety, the low self-esteem where we've had a loss maybe of our own self-worth, the job loss, abuse, a loss of safety and security, a loss of control maybe of our own body. Just so all of these grief events are under the water, but what the world sees is what's on top of the water. So I share this just to say, have compassion for others. Don't enable them, but have compassion for others and for yourself. If you see these kind of behaviors that have become patterns, habitual patterns or addictions for folks, there's a reason it got started. And it's probably rooted in some sort of loss. Oh,
you know what that sounds like? It's time for our poll. Thank you, Dan. So Kim has right there on the left side, basically in the red words, these are some identified STERBs, and there's so many more than that, right, Kim? These are just some.
Yes, examples. Yes. Examples
of them. So we just want to ask you in this poll, which STERBs, short-term energy relieving behaviors, can you relate to? And sorry, but you can only choose one. But if you would prefer to list multiple ones in the chat, you can also do that. But if you don't mind, just go ahead and make a choice. And again, this is it's anonymous, so nobody can see who said what, and we're not going to like trace you and find you about it. But like, what are some of the things that you find you are involved in as short-term energy relieving behaviors that possibly is a cover-up for your grief?
Mm-hmm.
So the polls are coming in. We've got some, and it's all those listed on the red words there on the left side, but we also have an other category because these don't fit everything. So thank you for giving that vote. We're getting very interesting results so far, Kim. So far, fantasy, movies, TV, books, video games, and that's 41%. Isolation is 30%. Sleep is 15%. And workaholism and food are, 7, but food just went a little bit higher.
Okay.
So it appears that fantasy is our top STERB.
33%.
Isolation is 26%. And then sleep goes next at 20. Food is 13. And workaholism comes in after that. Do you want to address any of these, especially fantasy? That's our high score, and isolation.
Well, first I want to tell you that I have participated in almost every single one of these at some point in my life. I just want to be completely honest with you all, and I want to thank you all for being honest on here as well. And so, yeah, the fantasy makes perfect sense, doesn't it? If we think about it, if we have a loss that's bringing some emotional pain and mixed feelings, it would be a comfort, wouldn't it, to kind of escape into a fantasy series or videos or all of these different mediums of fantasy. And Susie, I think you said a few words about this. You or Dan in earlier today about this. I don't know if you remember.
Sure. Yeah. About August is when we were coming out of our grief of what was and into a new space transition. And I was studying a book that it's called The Body Keeps the Score. And it's about post-traumatic stress disorder and how it affects the body. And in that book, all of these studies were showing two things are very helpful for stress or for this grief that we're going through. And one of them is community, being with people. And Kim has been talking to us last week and into today about the importance of being with safe people who have a big heart and two listening ears, a caring person who's walking the journey with you. And the second helpful piece for those who are really experiencing a lot of stress is story. And it doesn't have to even be the story of your stress or somebody who experienced similar stress, but being engaged with story. And probably that's why fantasy movies, TV, books, video games, or jumping into the story of others is so helpful.
Yeah.
But it can also be a STERB where it's a cover up for it. And that's what I hear you saying, Kim.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yes. And I see that Matt is saying it's natural in our culture to turn to food. It's on all the TV commercials. It's kind of the acceptable church STERB. Seriously, it's not thought of it's not as sinful as maybe having a drink or some of these other ones on here. So that's a really good point, Matt. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah. So the second was isolation. Talk to us about isolation, Kim. Okay. This didn't come up with our earlier Duzie Live as one of the high scores. So we are in the midst of isolation, and yet this can be a STERB.
That's right. That's right. So if you remember when we talked about those 6 intellectual and unhelpful myths of how to address grief, one of them was grieve alone. And we often do this because we start to experience a loss of trust as we try to express our pain to others, and they just don't know what to do with it. Maybe they try to fix us, or maybe they say, we've gotten the message, if you're going to cry, go to your room. And so we start to kind of learn that I may as well just be by myself and not be a burden to anyone. And, people don't know how to deal with it anyway. And it just makes me feel more hurt when people don't know what to say. So it's just easier for me just to withdraw from it all and isolate. So that's where that comes in.
Yeah, and Michaela has connected these two beautifully. Fantasy is a way to detach from reality and temporarily forget our own emotions, but the emotions of other people we are watching, reading, playing come into being. And then Matt jumps into that as well. He says, I think the difference between sharing story in a loving community and fantasy stories is that the first one is actually processing the loss and grief. The other is hiding away from it.
Wow. Yeah.
So that's powerful, Matt. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Very insightful. Thank you.
Yeah. So here we have some comparison going on, Matt. Let's just let everybody be it, because Michaela had a great one and you had a great one. And I think the beauty is when we're all just coming together and sharing all of our unique perspectives, and we get so much gold from it. So thank you all for sharing.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So maybe carry on here, Kim, shall you?
Yeah. So the when of STERBs, and this is becoming aware of when we're STERBing. And I've put a very personal picture there up in the right-hand corner of my spot on the couch. In the last year, when Ken and I were planning to go to the Lagos Hope, we couldn't because of a government shutdown. It kept him from renewing his Marine license. So we were landlocked. And I started working in a local hospital, which was not the mission field that I chose. I would rather have been back with our ship community. And I had some very mixed emotions about that. So I began really not realizing it at first to go to that spot on the couch with my pillow and my blanket and my remote control. And often there'd be a glass of wine and something sweet or something salty or a little of both, and turn on Netflix and get lost in a series. I would do this when I would come home from work, and at some point I started to become aware that I've got a habit going on here that I'm not even really making a choice anymore. This is my autopilot now. and it feels like something I have to do, not necessarily what I just want to do. So when we're talking about becoming aware, I'm hoping for you all it can be something intentional that you can begin to pay attention to. But as we begin to be aware of what you reach for or what you do when experiencing mixed emotions, start to make a list of what you're noticing. This may feel fun and adventurous for you, or it may feel very painful and awkward for you. And however it feels, that's how it feels. Doing these things doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It just means you've got emotional energy and you weren't taught healthy ways to deal with it. Often these are learned behaviors. I learned from my parents to turn to sugar. Remember, this influence learning starts at age 3. So some of the grief work that we do at the beginning is often with our first influences in life, and we work through some forgiveness of some of the things that they've taught us, so that we can be free to learn new things and new ways of doing things. We want to become aware of these patterns that we might be doing unconsciously, because that's how we can begin to change.
That's great.
Yeah.
We got a little chat.
Yeah.
Tammy wanted to just add something to the
Yeah.
fantasy.
Okay.
If you don't have a good community or safe person, you might go to fantasy, searching for community, even rather than hiding, even if they aren't responding verbally. Many of us have virtual people that we're following, for example, on Instagram or on the social media that we don't know, and we feel like we're known by them because they're speaking straight to us. And that could be a STERB as well, right? Not being able to actually have a chat about it.
Yes. Oh, Tammy, that is a beautiful point as well. And actually, often when someone famous dies, as a matter of fact, some folks may not understand why people are grieving that loss so deeply. And it's exactly why you're talking about here. This was someone who, like maybe I followed and maybe I knew details of their life, and maybe I've even communicated with this person.
Yes.
And they're putting out communication that feels very personal to me, and I'm resonating with what they're talking about, what their causes are, the roles they've played. So yes, absolutely. We can feel a connection, but you're right. If it's a connection that helps us or enables us to avoid our own pain, then it's a STERB. Yeah.
Right. I love your last point right there in that slide, Kim, that says in order to change habits, we need to be aware they exist. And this is the first point, just even being aware, which you've beautifully walked us through here. As we become aware of them, then we are able to take next steps.
Yes. And as you become aware, I also encourage you to tell another living person, if you don't have anyone you feel safe with, I'm willing to be. Am I hearing?
You're fine. Yep, go for it.
I'm willing to be a heart with ears but just if you become aware of something, to share it, because bringing things from darkness into the light is powerfully, emotionally and spiritually. So I would just encourage, as you become aware of this, to share it with someone safe.
Yes, Jacob asks, can sadness be a STERB? For me, melancholy can be a safe place as it hides the real deeper pain.
Wow, I think if we land on any one emotion, because remember we talked about anger, control, humor. So I think you might be onto something. The sadness could be, if we choose one emotion versus having the full range of emotions, if that's where we're comfortable, it could become a STERB. It could.
Yeah. Welcome, Mark Knight. Mark just jumped in. We're happy to have you.
And Jacob, thank you for, I'm sorry, I just wanted to thank Jacob for sharing that and asking that question.
Yeah, awesome.
Oh my gosh.
Take us through celebrations and anniversary dates, because this is a very important piece of STERBs as well.
That's right. So these, whenever there's been an end or a change in a relationship, we have established familiar habits and traditions with people that we look forward to celebrating with them on specific dates, right? And during the pandemic, I believe there have been a lot of celebrations that have had to be postponed or maybe canceled. So if you're having mixed feelings about that and some emotional energy about that, I want you to know it's normal. It is normal. Now, if it's a celebration or an anniversary date that you know in advance, you can prepare for this. You can make preparations for these dates so that you're not alone, whether that's virtually or however you would plan that. And you can do something special, whether it be in memory of someone. Like for Mother's Day, I have one of my mother's blue willow teacups. And on Mother's Day and on her birthday, I'll make sure to drink a cup of tea from one of my mother's teacups. She died back in 2015. And so this has just been something comforting to me to celebrate those dates in her honor. But if that's happened to you, or if you've got one coming up and you're feeling emotional energy about that, you are normal. You are normal.
Mm.
Oh. And I see that Dan wrote, you missed your grandchild's first birthday. I'm so sorry.
Yep, we saw him online, but that was it. That was a little bit difficult, but we have a postponed celebration someday when we can get together again.
Good, good. All right, so we see here that overcoming grief, we can't go over it, we can't go under it, we can't go around it, we have to go through it. And so I've added, you can't STERB over, under it, or around it either. You can STERB, but you still have to go through the grief. So we'll talk about that next. Where are we headed? We're headed toward something called completion. And completion means you've discovered and communicated what was unfinished for you in all aspects of the relationship, the positive, the negative, the happy, the sad, all those things that you've remembered up to this moment. So we've got our two gals there, one with the arrow to the other, being able to say what she needs to say about a relationship or a loss, and that the other person is listening to her, being a big heart with ears, so that she can express everything she remembers, the good, the bad, the ugly, about the event or the relationship, and know that she's been heard. And just a little tip I have on that, I have a peer coach who we meet every other week, and I get the first 30 minutes one week, and she gets the second 30 minutes, so that we know we've each been heard. And then the next week, she gets the first 30 minutes, and I listen, and then it's my turn to speak, and she listens. So we take turns being a heart with ears. And you can teach this to someone. You can find a friend and say, hey, would you be willing to do this? Would you be willing to be a heart with ears for me for 30 minutes every week, every other week, and then I'll do the same for you. And we don't have to fix each other. We just have to listen, and just so we know each one of us has been heard. So this completion that I'm talking about, it doesn't mean you'll never feel sad again. Sad is an emotion that we're meant to have in the right circumstances, but it does allow us to return to the full range of emotions, not to be stuck on one or two. It means you don't have to go over the same things over and over again, like that hamster wheel. We don't have to think about the same things over and over, that unfinished business, and we don't have to STERB with the emotional energy over and over because of trying to avoid it.
Kim, the 2 points that stand out for me is completion. Sometimes when we hear completion, when I originally heard that from you, it was completion like, oh, is it over? It doesn't feel over, but it's completion up to this point. And that was a beautiful way that you recommended that we find someone, and we can even teach them how to be a good listening ear and to let me go through the full range of emotions. Many times when we're in grief, we're stuck in one. or we're stuck doing the same things over again, or we even can be stuck telling one part of the story. When you don't have the full range of story, the full range of emotions, the full range of your life, and you're segmented down to a small space, probably be alert that you are in process of completion and you haven't completed this grief cycle. There's many parts to it, which unfortunately, even though you're a grief recovery specialist, we can't do this online like this in a teaching moment. You're just helping us get started there.
That's right.
And we can go towards completion of having the full range of our fully alive life.
Yes. So what I'm really hoping in sharing this with you is that if you're on a hamster wheel of STERBs, reviewing losses over and over in your mind, it's like you're on a hamster wheel with a heavy backpack full of losses. And I'm hoping from this moment forward, you won't keep adding rocks to your backpack, that you will have opportunity and connection to be able to express these things out. And then if you do find you need assistance unpacking your backpack, then I can help you connect with someone at the Grief Recovery Institute and just some other tools as well. So yeah, I just want at this point for people to know you are normal and natural. If you're having mixed feelings during this pandemic, that you've probably had some grief coming into the pandemic, and that this pandemic is maybe accumulating some other losses, and that your mixed feelings are normal and natural.
Yes.
Yeah.
Completion. Am I there yet, Kim?
Well, let's find out. Here's some clues that there might be some incomplete things in your backpack. If a person, if I'm refusing to talk about my loss, then there's a good chance I have some unfinished business there. If I'm thinking about a loved one or an event that's happened, or a loved one who's passed away, or a separated relationship, and happy memories become painful, then there might be some incompletion there. If I avoid places or events that remind me of a person or an event, there might be incomplete. That may be incomplete. If I will only talk about the positives of a person and not recognize they might have had some negative qualities too, that could be a sign that we're not complete. Or if I focus only on the negatives about a person and don't acknowledge there might have been some positives, then that might mean there's something incomplete there. We try to look truthfully at the whole person as we talk about completion. If I'm keeping the exact same routines as when someone was still alive because I'm afraid I'll forget them, I just want you to know that you will not lose your memories with completion. You keep the memories, your treasured memories of someone. And then if you avoid getting close to people, unresolved grief is usually at the root of fear about new relationships. So sometimes it's just enough to say, I might be incomplete with something, or with a relationship, or with ...
Mm-hmm. Kim, when I see that list, there's two word concepts that stand out to me. And I noticed this morning. Mm-hmm. One is avoid and only. So if you're avoiding something, or you're only doing a portion of it, then you're probably in the midst of grief, and you still need to process towards completion. Yeah. And I love what you just now said as well. You keep all the memories. Mm-hmm. But we're talking about grief and the emotions. So the emotional connection to the stories and the memory changes. Mm-hmm. I know for me, for sure, when I came off the ship and I was in grief because I lost what I knew, and changing into the new and transition, which, by the way, is what we're going to go into next week on Duzie Live, unpacking transition. Because transition, any kind of change, sets us up for grief.
That's right.
And so I noticed that many of my memories or my feelings were very intense in transition, But as we come to completion and we process those things, at least it was for Dan and I, for sure, the memories are there, but the limited perspective of only avoiding too much, too little, only negative, not able to talk about parts, we have broadened our capacity to see a broader and more fully and honestly more fully alive picture of those experiences now that we're in our new normal. And I think it's fine to say I'm incomplete with. It's fine to reach out to people and say, will you be a big heart with ears? I just need a person to do life with in this season of incomplete grief.
Yeah. And I am seeing a question in the chat. Joaz is asking about the death of a dream. And another definition of grief is the loss of hopes, dreams, and expectations. So when we have hopes and dreams for something, and that is not coming to pass or will not come to pass, then it would be normal to have mixed emotions about that. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's time.
Poll time.
So it's time for another poll.
The poll.
And this poll is basically about what you're seeing here on the slides. Completion. Do you want us to talk more about any of these ones? And it's all of those bullet points that Kim has prepared there. Or I can relate to. We'd love to hear from you. Again, this is completely your perspective, and everyone can vote very honestly because we can't see who it is. We just see you collectively as a group. What percentage of you say that?
Avoid getting close to people is at number one right now with 75%.
Dun, 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 dun.
Talk about the negative, 25%. Oh, now it's 30%. Now it's 28%.
It's changing as you all vote.
Avoid getting close to people is at 57%. The other ones remain. Oh, wait, there's 12%. And avoid talking about the person because
Thinking
of the
about
pain.
the
Thinking
person.
about the person. But it's definitely avoid getting close. It's way up there. Now it's 65. Now it's 55. Now it's 50.
Dun, dun,
Oh,
dun,
my. Avoid talking is jumping up. Talking about the negatives is jumping up. So right now, avoid getting close to people is at 54%, and it looks like it's staying there. No, it's not. It's not at 60%. Now it's at 50%.
Love this dynamic.
I love it when people wait for a long time to think, I wonder how long
Some
they're
people
going to
need
wait
more
for
time.
this. This is really good. No problem.
So it looks at 50% say avoid getting close to people or new relationships.
Mm-hmm.
That might be a good one to talk about, Kim.
Yeah.
And then following right after that, equally is talk about the negatives, talk only about the positives, and avoid thinking about the person because of pain. So those are like the very extreme perspectives, right?
Yeah.
Not talking about them, and relationships and negatives and positives, as well as avoid. So maybe you can speak to any of those, however you want to go with that.
Okay. Well, I'll start with avoiding getting close to people. And the picture that is really helpful in this is if your life is a car and you are in a driveway, and that driveway is the relationship where you've had a loss. And so you leave that driveway, whether maybe you chose to leave the driveway or you had to leave. So you've had a loss of relationship. But you've got things in your trunk, or I understand the boot, for our English friends, you've got things back there, or like in your backpack, that are from that relationship, hurts or unfinished business or sadness or just all those mixed emotions. And now you're driving down the road to meet a new friend, and you hesitantly pull into the driveway of your new friend, and whoops, you've still got a trunk full or a backpack full of unfinished business with your old friend. And that unfinished business really has no place in this new driveway, in this new relationship, but it gets carried into it. So that's what we're talking about here, is if you've got unfinished business from past hurts, losses, it's important to complete those so that you can go fresh and in the present moment into the next relationships.
Yeah, awesome.
Okay. All right.
We've got some questions coming up, but we'll hold them because we're trying to get to our 60-minute mark. And then we'll go backstage for those of you who can stay for more responses to the questions.
Yeah. All right. So since we know the emotions are produce this energy, this motion, let's talk about how then can we express the feelings so that we can express them out instead of holding it in. So I love this picture. I don't know if you've ever been to an aquarium where you've got the big glass window and all the fish are swimming by. So we're thinking of those fish as our feelings kind of swimming by in our mind. And in the present moment, we want to process each one as you have it. So we're standing there at our big glass window, the fish are gliding by, and first we see this beautiful school of fish, just gorgeous, and we're just in awe and wonder of God's creation. This is beautiful. I'm happy. And then all of a sudden, see, there's this shark up in the left corner there. That shark comes along and eats the fish. The last fish in the school didn't quite make it. The shark gets it. And we're like horrified. We're just enjoying life, and all of a sudden, chomp. And we might be horrified, terrified, just disgusted, maybe still in awe of God's creation. But oh my goodness, that was awful. And hopefully we can, in that moment, express it out, not pretend everything's fine. Feelings I'm not expressing, fine. Fine means feelings I'm not expressing. So we don't want to pretend that we're fine. We don't have to be strong. We don't have to be strong. We can express what we saw, how we experienced it. So then when that amazing seahorse swims by, we are fully present and free to appreciate its beauty and be in awe at that. We're not still held in that moment of shock and disgust because we've expressed it out, and we're now free to go on and express the next feeling. And as it says at the bottom, the feeling is expressed by expressing it. Seems simple, but it's true. Express it out.
I love that statement. The feeling is expressed by expressing it.
Yeah.
Should we express our feelings? Kim, tell us what we can do with this.
Well, this is our feelings wheel, and sometimes we don't know the words to put to what we're feeling. So this is something I have in the front of my journal that helps me. I can just look on there and all of these topics of sad, bored, scared, joyful, the full range of feelings, and just be able to put a word to it, to express it out. Sometimes it might be a color, sometimes it might be a picture or a doodle, sometimes it might be a scream or a song. But I just wanted you all to have this tool so that you could put words to what it is you may be feeling, because we're not always taught feeling words.
Yeah. And I think we're trying to have here in this Duzie live space, and I really appreciate that you are here and you're asking really deep and important questions. And we would love, if you are able, to choose some of these feelings that you see in the wheel and put them right down and express them, because this helps normalize our experience. Yeah. And for me, when I see different ones, emotions that you're writing down, I maybe wouldn't have chosen those initially, but I'm like, oh yes, me too.
Yeah.
So let's see, we've got a few people writing them out. Mark says fine. Oh, he's doing the fine acronym. Fearful, insecure, neurotic, emotional. So he's got his fine emotions there. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if you don't mind, just choose some of those words, any of the ones that hit you right now. And if they're conflicting emotions, probably perfect, you're here. Thank you again for showing up, First of all, for yourself, and then showing up for others, because as we process, then we have the experiences as well to show up with that really big heart and listening ears.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you don't mind, just pop your emotions right in there.
Mm.
Some of the ones for me, and I'll type it in, I feel energetic because I'm doing community with you. But at the same time, I feel quite isolated because of this whole pandemic that's going on. And it makes me very sleepy. I need more sleep right now. So those are some of the ones that are on, for me, on opposite sides of these feeling wheels. And this is an indication to me that I am having contrasting emotions that are going on, and there's grief. At the same time, we got a little puppy, so I'm feeling playful, and I'm having the most fun just teaching him new tricks, and he gets treats for things and having amazing walks. So how can playful and apathetic or sleepy go together? But they can, because this is the season we're in. So Matt says, thanks, Matt. Tired, isolated, frustrated, hopeful, excited, thankful, appreciated, inadequate.
Yeah.
So we're writing them down here now, and while we're waiting for them to come in, Kim, what do we do with these feelings that we have?
Well, I just want to thank each and every one of you. I'm reading them as they come in. I want to thank each and every one of you for being courageous to express how you're feeling. And I just want you to know, I hear you. I hear you.
Yeah, so Dan, it says Susie, but Dan's on that computer over there. He says scared, daring, isolated, pensive. And I said energetic, playful, isolated, sleepy. Yoaz says energetic, overwhelmed, thankful, frustrated, hurt.
Wow, I hear you. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you.
Diane says rejected, discouraged, angry, isolated, lonely, bored.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you.
Roseanne says optimistic, isolated, scared, hopeless, curious, excited.
Wow, thank you. I can relate to curious. I typed that in earlier today myself. I wish that I could speak with each one of you and know, like for Roseanne, like to know what you mean by curious. Like, oh, there's just, my heart is just wanting to just be able to interact with each one and hear where these are coming from and what they're meaning for you. And I just want you to know my heart is fully in this with you.
Rahel says lonely, relaxed, scared, hungry, fascinated, sleepy, isolated, stupid.
Oh, thank you for sharing that.
And there's a question, what are the words at the center of the red and the green? Those are not clear just on that slide.
Okay. The red is mad, and the green is powerful. I believe that's it. And then the purple is sad, right? Yeah. Purple is sad, red is mad, Green is powerful.
Thank you for that clarification. Yeah, some of our screens aren't that. I just want to note a point that I think you're experiencing right now as we're showing up, first of all, for ourselves and for others. Kim is teaching us by her response. And this really, in such a great way, floored me this morning when we first had this moment where people were vulnerable enough to share these deep feelings that they're having. And Kim's response is such a model for us. First of all, she says over and over again to us, I hear you. I see you. Thank you for sharing. And if you notice, it's a non-judgmental. It's not saying good job, bad job, but it's neutral, but it's saying, I hear you. She's got her two big ears listening to us, even as she reads them to us. And it gives, I feel so safe with Kim. I don't know how you feel as well, but I feel so safe because she's like empathizing, sympathizing with us in this grief process that is not quite towards completion for many of us.
Yeah. Thank you for having the courage to share how you're feeling. Usually, and we'll talk about this a little more in backstage, but usually we're encouraged to express what are considered positive feelings. But we're given a whole range of emotions and feelings. So the ones that would often be called negative, they are as valid and necessary as part of our grief experience. We need them we need to be able to express them in this grief process. And I saw something that Mark had written earlier about how we can embrace grief, and we talked about that last week. It is a sacred process, and it's a journey toward hope. And we've been taught to avoid it with STERBs and to stay busy, but it is something that we can embrace and move through.
Yes.
Together.
Yeah, that's right. There's a couple more. Dorothea, thank you for putting it out here. Amused, overwhelmed, stupid, secure.
Oh, goodness. Thank you for expressing that. And again, my heart is with you in this. Yeah.
And Lorena says, confused, isolated, thankful, overwhelmed, thoughtful, tired.
Yep. Thank you for sharing. Thank you. And I do mean it. Like I said, my heart, it just goes out to each and every one of you. True.
Yeah. Well, we've hit, Kim, over our 60-minute mark, and we want to stay in this space.
Yep.
But we want to acknowledge that there are many people who are able to stay longer, and we want to take this further and continue to just process a little bit more. And Kim has, she's got some resources available for us. There's one more slide that she wants to get to, why the thinking about the meaning. And we'll do that in backstage, if that's okay.
Sure.
And we will continue. So those of you who need to leave, thank you so much for joining us on Duzie Live. And those who are able to stay, please stay for backstage. And the backstage will continue follow up and your questions and comments, but also 10 ways to cope with isolation. And I found these so helpful, the way she rolled those out for us earlier.
Just a quick note, next week, the theme is going to be unpacking transition. And all of us are in the midst of transition. There are some of you that recently have come off the ship, or you've lost a job, or you've got a job, or we're all in the midst of that. And what we're going to do is how do we actually unpack that? There's also a question about can you watch these again? The one from this morning is already up on YouTube, Duzie Space Potter. Oh, wow. This one will be up by tonight. So they will be there for always and always. So you always can go back and find them.
And you can also click on this same link that you got here and watch the replay if you prefer to do it that way.
If you watch the replay, you just watch the whole thing through. If you go to YouTube, you can sort of jump around and find spots that you would really like. And I would just want to encourage you that if this has been of value to you, that you would tell 5 friends, just a
handful.
handful. Just tell them to join us, send them a link, send them to the YouTube channel, because I think this is something not just for us, but it's something we need to share with others.
Yes.
So those who have to leave, thank you so much for coming along this journey with us.
Yes. So again, thank you for showing up, first of all, for yourself, to talk about good grief and these STERBs, short-term energy relieving behaviors, and more than that, what to do with that. And for those of you who have to leave, I just want to remind you, we're going to talk more about it in a moment backstage, but the first steps are to acknowledge the feelings, which many of you have done. Yeah. And then the second area is to be present, to notice with your 5 senses where you are and be present. And Kim's going to take us there a little bit more. These are first steps. Mm-hmm. And Kim, for those who might have to leave, how can people connect with you if they'd like to after these moments?
I'm going to put my cell number in the chat, and also my email. I'll do that as well.
And while she's doing that, those of you who need to leave, thank you so much for joining us. But those who don't need to leave, the backstage portion is very valuable, and we'd love to encourage you to stay a little while longer or watch it on the replay.
These 10 ways are really good. I've already started thinking about how to apply them to my life from this morning.
Yeah, so good.
Okay, there's my email and my phone number, and I am on WhatsApp. Yep, and I am on Facebook under Kim Kukura. It's a picture of Ken, my husband Ken, and me.
Great.
Yep. And I do have a grief recovery page. I'll type that name in on Facebook.
And if anyone wants to continue to support or contact us, just reply to the email that you got saying where the link was, or you can connect with us on social media, on WhatsApp, or in any way you know how to connect with us. We would love to support you and journey with you in this good grief.
But to answer Matt Taylor's question, does everyone have a backstage pass? No. Only Matt has it, but he can bring all of his friends. Okay, you just bring all your friends with you, and you're in.
Welcome to backstage.
So we're in backstage. Thank you for those of you who have stayed. Those who need to leave, perfectly fine, and thank you for joining us. Kim, take us away in this backstage portion.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to touch on just some thoughts about the meaning of grief. Of course, we're moving toward completion. We're moving toward being fully present here and now with a full range of emotions, without fear and with love. That is where we want to be. And so just we see the need for a higher support bar. And what I mean by that is the red bar is our grief, our loss, our stress, our fears. And as high as that bar is, we need that and more in support in order to just have that place, that safe place to either express what's from the inside out, or to have fun, or just to be known, to be heard. We need that support bar. And I don't think I shared this before, but the year when Ken and I were hoping to go to the Lagos Hope and it didn't work out because of our government shutdown in the U.S., I went to a group at my church called Celebrate Recovery. And it was a place where I could go, and being normally the helper, it was a place I could go and have my few minutes of saying what was on my heart and know that I had been heard. And that was really helpful for me kind of during that season of my pain about not being able to go back to the ship. It also helped me not turn to food as often as a STERB during that season. And then we've got our concentric circles down here, and this is called the ring theory, if you want to look that up on the internet. But the griever, the person grieving, is at the center of all of those circles, and we want to pour comfort in wherever we are in those rings. We want to pour comfort in to the people closest to the grief. And then when we need to grieve or say I had a hard conversation, or it was Maybe I even need to say it was hard to be at the wake. We don't want to say it to those who are grieving. We want to have our own safe people outside these rings to dump our stuff out and to debrief our stuff out. So we want to pour comfort in toward the griever, and we want to debrief outside those rings of people who are grieving. Unless you have a situation like I spoke of earlier, an agreement with someone where your peers and you each take turns and it's a very intentional time together.
Kim, I love that. I just want to highlight just a moment. This is when we're dealing with people and we're being that big heart with ears. Mm-hmm. What we're doing for them is pouring the comfort in and allowing them to verbalize and to process those emotions towards completion. Mm-hmm. But sometimes when it's us going through that, we need that group of people for ourselves.
Right.
So sometimes we need two sets of people. When somebody asked earlier, can we help someone process grief if we are grieving ourselves? What would you say to that?
I would say absolutely. I would say as long as you are indeed making sure intentionally you have a safe place where you can share your heart, share unfinished business, and know that you've been heard, then that will actually give you space to then go alongside someone else who may be grieving and to hear from their heart. But again, like I've got at the bottom of this slide, if you have a difficult conversation, because as helpers, we can get into places known as compassion fatigue and empathy fatigue, where we take on other people's trauma, or we get tired and fatigued from hearing problems all the time. So we do have to have a safe place where we can go and say, without breaking confidence of the person who confided in you, but to go to your safe person and say, I heard some really hard information today. It was it took a toll on me, and I just need someone else to know that. I need to be heard in that. So yes, if we're grieving, because we're all grieving at some point during this pandemic, I believe, or it's possible, it's probable. But yes, if we have a safe place, then we can also walk along others who are grieving. Yeah.
And Kim, Mark Knight has a great, just a statement. He says, emotions are real and no need to explain or justify.
Yeah.
They are. And like you've been telling us today and last week as well, they contain energy connected to them. And what do we do with that energy? Do we process our grief in a good way, good grief, or do we allow them to go into STERBs and have these disturbing energy behaviors that we need to be aware of, that we do something with?
Yeah. And you're right, Mark, they're God designed and we're made in his image, and he is an expressive God. So we are meant to be expressive people as well. Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Continue to put your questions right in there. We're going to get to them. Kim has a little bit more that she just really wants to share resource-wise with us. 10 ways to cope with isolation, and also this resource.
Yeah, this is a podcast. Another grief recovery specialist is interviewing trainers from the Grief Recovery Institute. And so she interviewed Jay Westbrook about life, grief, and the coronavirus. And I found it a very interesting podcast, so I thought I would share it with you all as well. So I don't know if you want to take a screenshot of that, or...
I'm typing it quickly as I can.
Okay.
In case you want to just click on it.
Okay.
Got that.
All right. So now we move into, on the Grief Recovery Method website, the Grief Recovery Institute has posted blogs. And so I just here to show you there are several blogs on life and grief in the time of coronavirus. So those are out there and available on the website. But today we're going to hone in on the 10 helpful ways to deal with feelings of isolation due to coronavirus. So that's where we're headed now. So I've got the first 5 here. And the first one is just a basic overview of everything we've been talking about. Remember, there is nothing wrong with you. Grief is lonely and isolating on its own. And now here we are sheltering in place, and you're very much unique in how you're going to, how that's going to impact you. So how you feel is never the same as someone else. Your feelings are normal. Okay? Number 2, participate where you can. The antidote to emotional and physical isolation is participation. The idea that you need to grieve alone is a myth. Remember, that was one of our myths. So I've highlighted a line in the next part. Know that you should talk about your sad and painful thoughts just as you would your happy ones. They are just as valid and just as much a part of the full range of emotions. All right, we want to find ways to engage with other people. So we're living in this world of technology, so we can video chat. We can choose our favorite video chat service and start different kinds of meetings on them, Bible studies, book clubs, a trivia night. I mentioned Celebrate Recovery. My church is holding Celebrate Recovery now on Zoom. So you can actually go into a small group and have your moment to be heard. Hop on the phone. So we've gotten so used to texting and emailing these days. To get on the phone and actually hear someone's voice, that just takes it to a deeper level. It's just a deeper connection to hear a familiar voice. And then number 5, you can read the Grief Recovery Handbook. That book has everything we've talked about in Good Grief Part 1 and 2 in it, as well as the small choices and actions you can take toward completion. And those steps actually do involve getting to share your story and in very specific ways to help you discover what's unfinished in your story, and then a very specific way to communicate that to a safe person so that you know that you've been heard. Yeah. Any thoughts or feelings about those first 5 coming in? All right, then we'll move forward. Don't intellectualize your feelings. Grief is emotional, not logical or intellectual. So as we are social distancing, sheltering in place, it doesn't mean it's easy. So there's no need to, here we go, Mark, no need to explain away your feelings with intellectual truths. In fact, doing that can make you feel more isolated because you think you have no one to talk to. And then number 7, our topic for the day, avoid STERBs. Those short-term energy-relieving behaviors. They're activities that distract you from sad or painful feelings following a loss. And they work, but only short-term. So you got to keep going back and going back and going back. Eventually, they will stop working. And then check in with friends and family members. Set a time of day to talk with your loved ones. I had shared that I've seen people who are planning to talk with a different family member at a specific time each day. Like today I'm going to talk to my aunt. Tomorrow I talk to my cousin. Today I talk to my mom. So just kind of even mapping that out with them and have a planned time to connect. And then number 9, like Susie was talking about, practice your present moment skills. When you find yourself going out of the moment, remember you can get back in the present. First, acknowledge your thoughts and feelings, like if you were at the aquarium with the fish floating by, so that you're not avoiding those feelings. Focus on what's happening right in front of you. And that can mean, what do I see right now? What am I hearing right now? What am I touching? What am I tasting? What am I smelling? Engage your 5 senses and get grounded back in the present moment, and even with how you're feeling as your feelings arise. It's much harder if you try to ignore or push your feelings away. It just, like holding a balloon underwater, it just gets exhausting after time. And we're here to be fully alive. We don't want to get drained by trying to press down our feelings. And number 10, do an activity. The cleaning, the organizing, exercising, cooking, crafts, teaching your dog a new trick, home improvements. You see them all there. Gardening, working, just going out in the yard for fresh air, read a book. For me, I've been finding joy in memory keeping during this time. I had bought a planner. I'm not planning a whole lot of activities right now, so I'm now reflecting back on the week and seeing what were the themes of the week, what was the Lord saying this week, what's been happening, and trying to find those Kairos moments where the Lord's bringing things together. And I've been using writing, drawing, stickers, all kind of different things in that memory keeping. And that's just been something fun to do. So there's our list. And maybe you've got other suggestions you can put out there for the people who are still on.
Yeah. Kim, thank you so much for walking us through that. These are so valuable. I really love that.
Yeah.
Something you said earlier is about the unique experience. And one of the quotes I took down on my notes is to compare is to despair. Yeah. Can you unpack that for a moment with us?
Sure. Well, like I said, each one of us, no matter how great or considered small a loss may be, we experience our losses at 100%. So I may have lost someone special to me, and a person next to me may have broken up with a boyfriend. And we're each experiencing our losses at 100%. So to compare those losses doesn't do either of us any good. But what does do us good is to honor and respect where each other is in their grief and be a heart with ears to listen and let them know that they've been heard. Yeah.
Thank you, Kim. Somebody's asking, is that list available for download? That's actually one of the blogs on this griefrecoverymethod.com. Is that right?
That is right.
I know they can find that.
If you go to griefrecoverymethod.com and click on the blogs button, you'll find the one we talked about today, the 10 helpful ways to deal with feelings of isolation in coronavirus. And embedded at the bottom of that blog are all the other coronavirus blogs. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you'll find blogs on just about any aspect of grief. They talk about the 5 stages and what's helpful or unhelpful about that. They talk about just every aspect of loss, change, transition in those blogs. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. Matt says, I like that idea, memory keeping. That's a great twist on having a planner, backward reviewing on the theme of the week. That's cool. Just want to put a little plug in here for journaling. One of the ways that Kim is talking about is to write things down. Yes, we need people to help us process, but even writing it down, if you don't have someone yet, or even meeting with that person, you can get your thoughts out, because there is something biochemically in our body. I've been studying a lot about this with the brain that says when we take it from our brain, we can think it. But when we take it from the inside out, then we have a better chance of processing it. We identify in the scripture, it talks about things that are in the dark versus things that are in the light. Yeah. And so even putting it out on a journal for yourself to see it's the power that allows you to be in the light. And you can see what's going on. And then you're like, wow, God, help me with this. And what verse would help me with that? Mm-hmm. And earlier, Tim and Joan Thomas, my parents, were talking about the peace of God will guard your heart and your mind in Christ Jesus. Yeah. And Colossians talks about, set our heart and our mind on things above. Well, we can't quite get there if we don't know what to set our heart and our mind on, or what that is. So we don't want to just cover it with putting it there without the identification process of it.
Yeah.
And I find this personally for myself, it helps so much that I'm feeling things, but I don't have words. And when I journal, then I get the bigger picture of what's truly going on inside out.
Yeah.
And then I can begin to process those a little bit better.
Yeah. And we do have the peace and comfort of knowing that there's no condemnation in how we feel, that peace and comfort from God, that doesn't change no matter how tumultuous we feel on the inside for a season. That doesn't go away. It's there waiting for us as when we're complete. Yeah. Or as we work toward that. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much, Kim, for taking us through that. We really want to take this time here to just answer questions or discuss. Some of you might just say more about this or that, or could you unpack that a little bit more? Or maybe something that we didn't even cover at all in this Duzie Live last week or today. And it's something about grief. We would love. Are you happy to answer any random or related questions, Kim?
I'll do my best.
Great. Yeah. A question that came up earlier, which I think would be a great one for now. How do positive grief relieving activities compare to STERBs? Now, STERBs are things that we do, but some of the positive good grief activities that we do. Explain the concept of those two.
Okay. Well, yeah, so a STERB is something that we're doing. It's a short-term relief that we're doing to avoid processing the emotions we might be experiencing, those mixed feelings, those mixed emotions. And so the way to kind of distinguish, it's like, let's just take running. Let's say I'm a runner. And am I running as a STERB, or am I running because it's something healthy? And some ways to kind of tell is, am I choosing to run today for my health, or do I have to run or I'm not going to be okay? Does that make sense? And then like maybe with like eating, I know I have actually come home from work and all of a sudden I find myself with a bag of chips open. Like I didn't consciously make a choice to go. It's just, this is a habit or a pattern I've established after a hard day. I've had maybe just a loss of how I thought that day was going to go, and I'm frustrated and I come home and the bag of chips is open before I realize it. So that could mean that I've been using the food as a STERB, and now I've got a pattern of unhelpful behavior going on. And so I'm really trying to intentionally now be aware. You know, you all remember my spot on the couch. When I come home from work, I don't sit in that spot. If I'm going to sit on the couch, I actually move to a different cushion. That I'm being very intentional right now. And then if it's time before bed that I want to kind of cozy in and maybe watch something, then I can go to the spot. But it's a choice, and I'm not finding myself there, and I don't have to be there after work. It's now moved to a choice that I can make.
Thank you for sharing that very personal illustration. You're finding yourself there, or you have to be there. Mm-hmm. So it becomes like a vice, or what's the word I'm thinking of? Like a habit. Mm-hmm. A habit that is an unhealthy habit, like an addiction, for example, right?
Right. If you remember iceberg.
Yeah, we think of addictions as something way out there, but we might have that behavior that's not even thought through, and we're finding ourselves there, or we have to do it, or we're not okay.
Yeah.
Very, very powerful. Matt says, it gives me a new perspective on my journaling. For a year now, I've had a what went well journal. I love that, Matt. I might want to try that as a part of my journaling. But now I'm wondering whether I should start a what I'm grieving journal or what I've lost or let go of journal too. Can you speak to that, Kim?
Well, I love that idea. I just love that idea. I can't say anything else. I love it. I love it.
Let's try it. And Matt has another question. How can we start to identify grief, loss that we maybe aren't even aware of?
Well, that is something that if you were to purchase the Grief Recovery Handbook, it would walk you through that process. And I did share at the end of last time, it just starts with a review of the losses we do remember in our life, graphing that out just as a timeline or in pictures. And often what happens is as we start to do that, other losses will start to kind of fill in. It will jog our memory. But in those losses, we'll identify relationships that we need to go deeper into, and we'll also graph those relationships. And that typically will bring to mind what needs to be brought to mind in the right time. So this isn't something that we force. It isn't something, some people start the process of grief recovery, and once they get to reviewing all of their losses or the relationships they need to complete, they're just not ready yet and they stop. And that's perfectly okay. This has got to be something that someone's ready for in an intentional process as we work toward the completion. So I'm just hoping that whatever is in your backpack now, or just from here on, we won't add to it, that the losses will happen, but you will be able to express out going forward. And as you remember things that might be unfinished, to go ahead and start expressing that out and just feel more alive.
Can you speak to us about the grief cycle once again? What is the cycle? The Kubler-Ross cycle. It's like a U. I was chatting with somebody this week, and we were talking about the grief cycle, which is like, this is where you were, something happens, and you basically dip down, and then back up here again on the new cliff is the new normal. But to me, there's a U in the middle. And I was just chatting with her. And as we were talking, I just said, oh, you just need to find you in the U. And I was like, whoa, that actually is so good, because up here, we sort of know where we are, where we were, and where we're going. But then there's a you. And I just found myself saying that to her, and we had a great laugh. I was like, find you in the you.
That's great.
That's memorable. Where are we in that process? And how can we find ourselves? How can we find our you in the you?
Well, I think I'll use the whiteboard again. Let me see if I can. What did I do? Okay, so it's not letting me use the whiteboard today. I was going to draw the U, which ultimately, what that speaks to me, I've seen this before, is a smile. That we're, again, headed toward hope. It's a journey toward hope. And as we go through that cycle, it's really kind of where I come in, is just being honest and authentic about how we're feeling wherever we are in that you. And that's how we're going to move forward. So wherever we are, just practice those skills of here's where I am today. Here's what's floating by in that aquarium window. Express it out. This is where I'm grounded right now. And just at whatever point you are in that you'll keep progressing. You'll keep progressing.
Mark is asking, Kim, did you experience the loss of grief and you did not want to move on?
Did I experience a loss or grief where I didn't want to?
I think it's probably loss or grief, yeah? And you did not want to move on. Did you ever just feel stuck and you couldn't move on?
Well, I would say probably in this last year when I was on my spot in the couch. Again, this was more of a loss of a dream or a hope of going back to the Logos Hope, and ending up working in a psychiatric hospital. And yeah, I think I wallowed a little bit, to be honest with you. I got comfortable in my spot. And as I was doing this reflective practice, I think that's what helped me begin to see it. And as I became more aware of it, I knew it was time to move on. I wasn't really honest with my accountability coach, my peer coach, about it. But once I said it out loud, it was in the light, and then I could start to have the energy to address it and the desire to address it. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So we're talking
I'm human. I'm human. I'm on the right planet.
I hear you, Kim. Thanks for sharing this. Yeah.
Well done.
That's so important for you to be honest with that. And I love what you just said. You weren't being honest. And then when you did become honest, that made such a transformational difference for you.
It did. Yeah. It did.
That's good. Any other questions or thoughts before we close down? We can keep going if we need to, but we also value all of your time.
Oh, Jessie is saying she thinks he's asking if we stopped grieving but didn't want, like if grieving was what was helping us maybe feel connected to who or what we lost, maybe. And I think that is an experience that some of us have. My deepest loss was with my first marriage, a divorce, and I really was ready to move forward in that loss. But I have worked with people, and I understand how it might feel like continuing to grieve would keep us feeling connected to a person who we've lost. But as we talked about earlier, if we come to completion of the unfinished business with that person, our hopes, dreams, expectations, if we can find a safe place to be heard, then the memories, the true connection is going to remain in our heart and mind.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't read that properly. Thank you for clarifying that, Jess. Yeah, Matt says, thank you, Kim. The link with honesty is so good. As Jesus said, the truth will set you free.
Yeah.
We were referring to that 1 John chapter 1 passage about being in the light, but the bit comes first, which I really love. It's about being present with our five senses. It says, that which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, we've looked at and our hands touched. This we proclaim concerning the word of life. And this is God in the midst as well. The life appeared, and we have seen it and testified to it. And we proclaim to you the eternal life, which was with the Father and has appeared to us. We proclaim to you what we have seen and heard, so that you may also have fellowship with us. And our fellowship is with the Father and his Son, Jesus. And then jump down to verse 7. It says, if we walk in the light as he is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus, his Son, purifies us from all sin. So I think that just the reality of our five senses in the moment. And when we are real with that, God is with us. And especially when we're together with the reality of the moment and other people. That's like 2 or 3 are gathered together and God's in the midst of them.
That's right.
And that is a process like Matt's talking about. We know the truth and we experience the truth together, and it helps set us free.
When I was a little kid, we went to a church where every Sunday night was testimony night. And it was just people standing and giving testimonies of what God did. And they were amazing stories. But I remember one day going, why are all these stories good? No one was telling about, I am in the midst of this problem. It was always after the problem. And I remember talking to my mom about it and just connecting of why can't we be real in the middle of the problem?
Yeah.
And I think that's why we try to emphasize so much the net concept of having a nest where you may not be able to be real. Maybe it's not even wise to be too real with the large group, but to have that small group, that nest, that you can be so vulnerable in the midst of the story, not at the completion of the story.
Yeah.
And I also just think when Dan talks about that, it's talking about the healing verses, confess your sins to one another so you may be healed.
Yeah.
And I think, that confess or talk about these emotions together, that also is in the same category for me when you bring those out into the light, and there is healing that's possible there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Matt has a quick question about the grief journal idea. If you are going to do a grief journal, which sounds like he's going to start, and Matt, we've seen your journals you just bought on our Fully Alive Revolution Facebook group page. Just a little plug for that. So we know you have some, but if you're going to do a grief journal, how would you set out? Daily, weekly? What questions would be good to ask?
Well, I'll tell you how I have done this. And whenever I'm on the mission field, I do a grief journal. And what that means is each day I do a timeline of that day. And I do the positives in chronological order that happened that day. And if it was a really positive, it gets a really long line. And if it was slightly positive, it gets a shorter but positive line above the timeline. And if there was something really hard or grievous that happened that day, then it's a line below the timeline. Oh, you'll be.
I don't know if you can do it.
There, I can do it. So
that's so practical.
Here's for instance, here's my day today. I got up this morning and I had a staff meeting for work. That was all right. But then I got to do Duzie Live session 1, and that was like, woo! Then Ken and I had brunch, and then we went for a walk and we saw an eagle in its nest. And I thought about your nest with doing life together in the nest. And then I came back and here I am doing Duzie Live number 2, and it's awesome. And in the midst of that, I had to cover up all the stuff behind me with a sheet because we've moved in the last year and there's still some transition going on with these belongings. And that was just kind of like, it wasn't horrible, but it was just a little bit of a nuisance. And then I have a friend who is going through some struggles who has been messaging me all day, and I have very mixed feelings about what's happening in her life. So I just kind of map out my day like this. And then I just go, okay, so is there anything here? And how am I feeling? I'll put some feeling words to each of these. And then is there anyone I need to say thank you to today in all of this that I haven't delivered that communication yet? So thank you, Dan and Susie, for having me.
Yes.
I don't want that undelivered. I don't want that communication to go undelivered. I want it to be heard here and now. Then I think, is there anyone I need to make an apology to today in any of these below the line interactions? Do I owe someone an apology today? And then are there any really significant emotional statements I just need to jot down in this? And so that's just kind of the process that I use as I would go day by day, so that I can end the day and tell the hard things goodbye, and be thankful for the things above the line, and then be fresh and ready for the next day.
So in a way, really, you take time at the end of the day to draw your heartbeat of the day.
Oh, it does look like a heartbeat, doesn't it? I like that.
Sounds and to go back, and then at the end of the day you finish by recognizing your rhythm of the day.
Yeah.
You give that over to God, and then you're able to sleep. I like that.
Yeah. Yep. So I've got these up here, and I've got these down here, and again, some are mixed. And Yep.
Now going to Switzerland now. I'm happy.
Laura, what do you think? Does that look like Switzerland to you? That's awesome.
A question from Tammy there too, Sis.
Yeah. Clear and what's that? Wait, word off. Wow, thank you for drawing that. Yay, the whiteboard came out.
Thank you.
So Tammy has a question. She says, I have a friend who's stuck in her grief of a death that she feels guilty about. She feels she was negligent and caused it. How do you help her get past her grief?
Well, when someone would come to me to work through their grief intentionally, I would help them to put guilt, the G word, we call guilt the G word. And guilt is defined as intending harm. So if someone didn't intend harm to someone else, but they're heaping guilt on themselves, we just try to say, can we put the word guilt back in the dictionary? And because it doesn't sound like you intended harm, it sounds like you really wished something had been different or better, that maybe you had done something different or something different had happened. But the heaping the guilt on ourselves can tend to hurt us more. And if there is something that the person wishes had been different or better or more, just you can say, I'm willing to be a heart with ears. If you want to express that with me, I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to hear that and be in this with you. And then if they need further assistance than that, like you can help her. You can, if she's interested, give her the Grief Recovery Method website. She could find someone trained to walk through steps toward completion through that website.
Yeah.
Because in my experience working with something like that in the past, I it was like they were carrying this huge weight in a backpack.
Exactly.
And it was like, how do I get that backpack off? But it always has been for me, how do you take one thing out at a time? How do you get them to realize that, let's just deal with one part of it? And that's where I found a lot more success. I mean, I just see it there. I want to get that backpack off, but it's not Pilgrim's Progress. It's one step at a time.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
and I hear you saying that, and I also just hear us talking about these simple steps of really just acknowledging our feelings and getting in touch with our 5 senses. And that's if we're showing up for ourselves, that's what we need to do. But if we're showing up for someone else, then we help them acknowledge their feelings and help them get in touch with their 5 senses. And that's already, for us untrained people in grief, that's already a huge help for them. And sometimes that's just the road. That's what I'm hearing you say today. Sometimes we need a longer road and a longer process of somebody who can take them through the steps to get that full relief from that grief.
So we're going to come to the end here, unless you have one. You may have put a question out and we didn't see it. You can repeat it. Repeat that up there. We're not going to go back through. It's a very long chat, which is a very good,
beautiful chat.
We'll go through later, but if there's anything that we've missed, and again, you always can write to Kim. You can write to us. We may deal with some of this next week. We see some questions coming in, really of how to unpack your transition. If there is anything, you got a few moments to write that in there, and we'll hit it before we move on and let Kim go to her couch on the other side.
Different cushion. Kim, as people are writing in there, we might just have a couple more. What words would you say for us who are trying, we're here, we're showing up really because we're very interested in good grief for ourselves and or for others. What would you say to us as a blessing, a wish, a snapshot, just piece of advice, or something from your loving heart?
Well, this is Chaplain Kim talking, not Grief Recovery Kim. I mean, we're one and the same, but grief recovery is for people of all faiths or people who have a loss of faith. But I wanted, as you hear helpers, and I believe people of faith, I just want to bless you and remind you, you are the priesthood of believers. You are here to be present with each other, to represent the Lord Jesus Christ to one another, and to hear confession, and to affirm forgiveness, and to just validate and acknowledge and be present with each other. So I just bless you in that. I just bless you in that. And thank you for being willing and being courageous to go on this journey yourselves and with others.
Yeah. That's great. Well, thank you so much, Kim. It looks like we've come to the end of our chat there.
No more questions have popped up.
Thank you all for staying with us here for almost 2 hours. Woo! I think this is our longest one ever, and I am fully engaged still.
Yeah.
But it's time to move on, and I agree that you would be blessed, that you would live fully alive.
Yes.
We've been just studying this whole concept. What does it really mean to live fully alive? And it's really two things: that you live and you love, and your life is God has given you life, so live. And then the outgrowth of that is that there is love for yourself, for your world, and for your God. I mean, it's so simple. And sometimes we get so trapped. So be blessed to live fully and love fully this week.
And we want to just once again thank you for showing up for yourself and for others and being here a part of Duzie Live. And if this has been of value to you, we encourage you to share it with a handful of friends and either hook them up to the YouTube version of that. Those are all very, very shareable, or connect them to Duzie Live next week, which is going to be about unpacking transition. And if any of you have some ideas of what you'd like to hear, see in that process, further the next steps, then please write to us. We are listening. We've got our big ears out there. We love to hear from you. When we hear from you, it goes into what's going on here. So we're early adapters, so we can hear it and pop it in already to next week. We are just not stuck in that space.
And I actually believe in my life, the greatest grief opened doors to the biggest opportunities.
Yeah.
And we just can't get stuck. We have to go through those doors and find what we would have not found without the grief.
Yeah.
Make it good.
Jess has stated this so beautifully. Susie, Dan, Kim, this has been wonderful. Giving people the space to understand grief, to help others and themselves is a huge gift. Yeah, Kim, thank you so much for giving us this gift, this process. Thank you for taking the time to create this space and give of yourself in this way. And Jess, you are welcome. You are welcome. We love each and every one of you, those we know and those we're going to hopefully meet someday. Yeah. It is our honor. And I think what you've said is really our heart in this whole Duzie Live experience, and actually every part of the Fully Alive Revolution. We really want to make it a safe space where people can go to the places where they really are. Yeah. And we love having this space. So thank you for showing up and making this space what it is as well.
Lots of thank yous there.
Yeah, thank you for the thank yous.
Well, God bless you and keep you. May his face shine upon you, and may you have joy in the journey.
Yeah. Thank you, Kim. We're so blessed by you, and we'll have you back at yet another time on our Duzie Live journey. We've got some plans in our pockets, don't we?
Mm-hmm. Good stuff.
May you be blessed as you've been fully alive today, using your gifts, your experiences, your abilities.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Bless you, everybody.